Welcome to the Aiki Dojo Podcast. I am David Ito, Chief Instructor of the Aikido Center of Los Angeles. And with me is...
Bill D'Angelo, also of the Aikido Center of Los Angeles. In order to be a better Aikidoist, is it more effective to play to your strengths or work on your weaknesses?
Well, the thing is that initially it's easier to play to your strengths.
What do you mean by that?
Well, because like when you're, ideally, if you start when you're younger, you're faster, stronger, so you use those things to improve your skill as opposed to playing to your weaknesses or addressing your weaknesses, which takes longer, right? So if you're fast or you're strong, you use strength and speed to improve your Aikido.
Right. And in the beginning, though, that has very fast returns, is what you're saying. Like you use your speed, you use your strength, your resiliency, your ability to take ukemi over and over again. That gets you to a certain level right away or very quickly.
Well, I wouldn't say it's fast or slow, but it's just that it's more comfortable. Like if you're very organized, you go through the Aikido technique repertoire and you collate it and organize it in a understandable way, which enables you to learn it faster. Or if you're super strong, you use your strength to force the technique to work.
Right.
So, but the weaknesses would be like, let's say, you get mad really easily.
Okay.
And so you're working on anger management. That takes a lot longer than cranking someone's wrist.
Yeah. I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I remember either an article that he wrote or a discussion he had with us at Intensive that he said, Furuya Sensei said, that you should go to your worst technique, work on it until it becomes at least a very good version of the technique.
Yeah.
And then you drop down to your next worst crappy technique and you just you self-ladder. As an algorithm for getting better. What do you think about that?
Well, yeah, he wrote that article like in the 80s. It's
long
like
time ago.
The chain link method. But the thing is that method depends on how you look at it. Are you looking at it by using your strength to shore up your weakness, or are you looking at something which is weak and try to make it strong? Right? And so the worst place any Aikidoist can be, teacher or student, is self-unaware.
Deluded.
No, not even deluded, just unaware. Oh, what? I don't know. I didn't know I did that. So regardless if it's a strength or a weakness, if you're not aware of it, like...
You can't fix it.
You can't fix it, but it is very hard to get to a super high level in Aikido if you are unaware of yourself.
Because it's an interesting point, because when I think back, like, as I was going to ask you, like, how did you learn in the beginning? But what I remember was I was getting beat up all the time. And I didn't want to get beat up anymore, but it took a long time not to get beat up.
So did you use your strength or your weakness to get you through?
No, strength for sure.
Right, your perseverance, your ability to take pain.
Right.
So you use that to your benefit.
Right.
Right, as opposed to you said, man, I just want to quit. I feel bad about myself, and then you go to therapy and you read a whole bunch of self-help books, and then 2 or 3 years later, you come out of it and you're like, wow, I'm so much better at Aikido now.
Right.
So see how like it's very easy to pump up your physical body.
Right.
And it's a lot more convoluted and hard to develop
the mental game.
Yeah, the mental part of it.
Yeah. I think the mental part is the hardest, right? I mean, if you start out, like, I mean, one of the things I remember too, and I was going to ask you, is that because Furuya Sensei didn't do a lot of explanation, he didn't talk about ki, didn't talk about almost anything, and then you're trying to get better or fix it. You're constantly in this, as you say, this like strength, pain cave, and it's very hard to think. And we didn't get a lot of off ramps for how to think about development.
And you wonder if it was by design or happenstance, but it really worked because, like you said, you got better because you were unable to think about it.
Right.
You had to. It's called Gaman Taikai. Gaman means perseverance. Taikai means event, right? So Gaman Taikai, there was no way to go, oh, I don't know how I feel about myself because someone's smashing you on the ground or hitting you in the face. So, but that's that thing that you have to begin in the beginning physical.
Right.
Because Aikido is is a physical art.
Right. It's a martial art.
So then you have to master these physical things, but then later on, and then in the beginning, they're like telling you, don't think.
Right.
But later on, as you get better, then the only way to go forward is to think.
You have to evaluate. You
go, wow, why do I feel this way? Why did I say that? Why did I do that? And then if you're sober enough, you go, okay, I'm going to address that. Like in the past podcast, I've told this story about like one of the first times I ever talked to Sensei. I said, I would like you to recommend a book for me. I don't really know that much about Japanese culture, and I'm looking for a book, because I don't know, some part of me thinks that like Aikido doesn't work, or so it's just something to better understand myself. He just keyed in on that Aikido doesn't work part.
He got really mad,
lit me up for like an hour. Yeah. You don't know enough to make that judgment about Aikido, and I was just like, okay. And all I really wanted was a book to read on Japanese culture, but somehow I accidentally said
got into this dynamic.
He lit me up. And then, probably, I don't know, half a dozen, 10 more times, walking up to, Sensei, and I say something dumb, and he goes, what did you say? And he flips out on me. Yeah. And then I got to a place where, before I knocked on the door, I thought to myself, what do I want to say? Okay. And then I knocked on the door, and then I succinctly talked about what I wanted, and because it was already rehearsed and scripted,
right?
And then I got what I wanted, and he didn't. And the thing that I got was that he didn't flip out on me,
right?
But like, I had to use my intellect in order to overcome that thing.
Was that like the first time that you realized the mental side of the game?
No.
So you had known about it long before.
I don't know if I knew about it long before, but I was really interested in sports psychology. Like I was steps away from doing sports psychology or acupuncture. And like, I read like every book on sports psychology. And, it's like sports psychology is all inner work, right? And then, so those weaknesses, I learned to identify them and try to address them. And it wasn't quick. It took years, decades to weed out some aspect of my personality that I didn't care for.
Yeah. Well, I always wonder, like when you talk about sports psychology, and we've talked about on this podcast before whether Aikido is a sport or not, and obviously like our teacher's perspective, and I think yours too, is Aikido is not a sport. So how did you get sports psychology to apply to this discipline? I mean, if you were able to.
No, it's because knowing what I know now today, Aikido was 100% mental. And that once you can change aspects about your mind and how you think, your Aikido really starts to improve. Yeah. It is incredible. But first you have to realize that there's a thing, then you got to accept it, and then you got to find ways to weed it out. And that can be difficult.
Yeah. What was if you had to look back on all of it, everything that you read, I know you studied sports physiology and mechanics in college. What would be the biggest takeaway or a thinker that you read that was like, oh my God, like this opened my eyes really big?
I don't really know, because there's so many, like the one I'm really thinking about today is that how you do anything is how you do everything. And up to a certain level, that's true. But after a certain level, that's not true.
Like, give me an example.
So, like, they say the same you should be the same you at Aikido as it is at work and it is at home.
Okay.
But that's not true.
Why?
Because you must go with the flow and address the situation in the present moment. And whatever the present moment situation needs, you must be that person and adapt, right? So you can't be a martial artist at your house because your spouse or friend mouths off and then you just start beating them up.
Right.
So you can't really do that. You can't be that way at work, right?
Get fired.
You get fired. You can't be super rigid and detail oriented like at work when it comes to your spouse's cooking, right? So you
Otherwise,
see,
you'll never eat again.
yeah, and then you wake up and your head is as flat as a frying pan, right? But like that's that thing is that in the beginning you're a certain way and you have to address certain things, and so you use strengths to build yourself up. But once you build yourself up, now you must refine that self. And that's why Miyamoto Musashi says it takes 1,000 hours or 1,000 days to develop
a technique
and 10,000 days or hours to polish that thing. And you think, yeah, that is super true. Because like you have to get your body strong and then refine the technique.
You know, I was thinking about a bunch of different things for this topic today. One of which was, you know, it's a martial art that has some shared history with Aikido, like judo. Like if you look at current competition judo, most of like the big gold medal winners and regional championships and the Olympics, they have like 3 to 4 techniques.
Most only have one.
Like
most judoists work on one technique and refine that one technique. Very rarely do you see people coming up with
multiple techniques.
Well, they win the championships and medals with different techniques. Most times, if you look at most people's how they won those medals,
it's very consistent.
70% were done with the same technique.
So I was thinking about that. I mean, clearly that's because you have competition, right? You want to make sure your body reacts in a consistent, successful way. But Aikido's not competition. So I don't know that the example that I drew doesn't work as well for Aikido because you're not trying to win a rules-based competition.
Well, I mean that, and it's not a real fight. You're setting the person up to do this one throw, and that one throw, you know, is incredible. So if you look at Ronda Rousey, when she first came into the UFC, she was destroying everybody with the same techniques. Yeah. But then something happened along the way, and then they figured her out.
Right.
And then she got knocked out again, and retired.
Yeah.
Right. But martial arts, true Budo can't be that way. You must have, your body must be able to move and address different situations, different strikes, different opponents, and all those things at any given moment.
Right.
You don't have the luxury of fighting people within your own weight class and gender.
Right. There's no rules.
So that's why in the beginning you really build yourself up to be strong so that you can take on anyone in your weight class. And then you refine yourself so that you could take on any person.
So do you think that we were talking earlier in the podcast about Furuya Sensei's heuristic that you take your best technique, get good at it, drop down to your next worst, as a plan, does that work, you think, for most of us? Or did you use that?
I did not use that because we did not have that luxury, right? Like we didn't get to say like, no, I'm only going to do Seo Nage or I'm only going to do Idemi Nage.
Right.
Sensei taught the class, and you were required to master
taught,
whatever technique he was teaching it, however he's teaching it. And Furuya Sensei was a lot about the only the strong survive.
Mm-hmm.
So like we always talk about how he would just show the technique one time,
right, and then you got to catch it or you don't.
And then you were walking back to the line, wiping your face, and then he goes, "Okay, go," and you're like, "Oh, what happened?"
Right.
And so you get to this place where you're walking back to the line, one eye on him, so you can see the technique, or you get to a place where you're good enough to know exactly what technique he's going to do next.
So that type of that's a psychology trick, right? It's not even a trick; it's a technique. Knowing that he's going to do that, you have to have a different mindset.
Right, and then he didn't tell us you better do it like this.
He just did it.
When he did it, and he showed the technique one time, and you didn't get it, he would just, oh my God. And he would just, no, he wouldn't yell. He would just lament about how, oh my God, Bill, you're a third degree black belt. You don't know how to, you should just give up this black belt. And then he would harangue people
to death.
And then you would be like, I don't want to be that person. And so you knew you came up with a strategy. My strategy was, as I was going back to the line,
always watch him.
I always watch.
Yeah.
Right. But I also got to a place where I had a very good idea of how he thought, and I knew
what was coming.
Basically what the technique was that was coming next.
Do you think Furuya Sensei's style, that style of teaching, because it's a style, right? I mean, it's a way.
It's a methodology.
It's a methodology. Do you think he picked that up at Hombu Dojo, as if you were to speculate on it?
I have no idea where he would have picked up something like that.
He may have just developed it himself.
I mean, you hear stories about sensei just doing the technique once,
right?
And then, but I mean, also it's a test of who's
paying attention,
who's good, right. who's talented, right?
And that's a type of teaching that doesn't necessarily catch the people in the bottom 50, whatever you want to call the bottom 50 is. But
right.
if you're in that bottom 50, that style, it's hard. You not need to rely on your fellow students to get you out of that hole, right?
But you have to remember, it was very elitist then,
right?
And so anyone below the 50% mark,
no one cared.
No one cared about anyways,
right?
You were just fodder. For since you didn't put any time into you,
right? But it's not like that anymore. At least not in our school.
Because I'm just not that type of person,
yeah.
Right? And like, I really do believe that Aikido is for everyone, but is not for everyone.
What do you mean by that?
It is the possibility, the opportunity for Aikido to be there for everyone is there, but it's not for everyone. Right? It is available to everyone, but it is not for everyone, right? Everyone can go drink Coca-Cola. You have money in your pocket, you go buy it, it's freely available. Aikido technique is there, but for some people it is unattainable, whether it be financial problems, logistic problems, no teacher problems, time management problem, whatever it is. It is for everyone, but it is not for everyone.
Interesting. Have you seen, either as a longtime student, now as chief instructor, are there people that are falling through the cracks that you think we can do better to keep in Aikido, by focusing either on their strengths or finding a supportive way to give people criticism?
I don't know. I try to think of all these different ways and methods. The biggest problem is that I am not in the dojo every day.
So you don't see everything.
And you don't go, don't do that.
Right.
Oh, what are you guys doing? You don't get to meet every person. And so if someone reads my writings or watches this podcast or whatever it is, they give a certain idea and then they come and take someone else's class.
It's not the same.
Sometimes it's not the same, and then they become disappointed.
Right.
And you're like, I didn't even meet that person, but then it has to be that way, because if not, it becomes a cult of personality. Right? And then they're all following me. Hi, sensei. Hi. And you're like, whoa, dude. Like,
chill out.
Yeah. And that's the funniest thing is like you see sometimes these teachers who
create that environment
for their students, and like the students are like worshiping the teacher, and like, I don't want that, man. Like, I'm the farthest thing from that. I'm way more private. It's like, I'd rather just eat by myself,
right? Rather
than get somebody to go with me so that they pay and then they kiss my butt and open the door. Like, I don't want that,
right?
Because the thing is, one of the things I don't know if this is off topic, but it's that a lot of times when teachers have a really elite students, they end up butting heads with them. And then, so what ends up happening is that in the end, only sycophants are left.
Right. Only yes people.
Yes people, sycophants, suck-ups. And then when the teacher dies, the whole organization falls apart, because the only people left were people who were not autonomous thinkers. I'm waiting for Sensei to give me my opinion.
But it's interesting. Like, if you look at when you started before me, but we had Furuya Sensei together. I thought, without saying it, he did a really good job of saying that when your start, or your first 5 or 10 or 15 or even 20 years, like having a consistent teacher, whether he gives you positive or negative feedback, it's easier to learn from one style, I think.
Well, yeah, and that's why people today go, I want to learn all these different styles.
Right.
Which is, you can't.
Right.
You can't just try driving a car, riding a motorcycle. You got to learn to ride that motorcycle or drive that car first.
Right.
And then you could try other
something
vehicles.
Else.
But if you try a different car every day, one day it's stick shift, one day it's 3 on the tree, you're like, I'm getting confused.
Right.
I just want it to be one way so I can master this one way first, and then I'll come back to those.
Right.
But the eclecticness of martial arts, the inclusiveness of martial arts today makes you think, oh, we should go to all these different seminars and see all these different teachers, which is true, not at everyone's level though.
Right. Like, not right away.
No, because once you go to another teacher, you're learning finishing, right? That person, you go to a seminar. You don't go to a seminar to learn Kihon Waza. You should be learning that at home. So that's when we talk about this idea of strengths and weaknesses. Strengths, learning Kihon Waza builds up the strength, but at the same time, learning Kihon Waza fills in the weaknesses.
What do you mean by that?
Well, the weaknesses is, let's say, if you're look at one weakness is your inability to move in deeply.
Okay.
The more you study this Kihon Waza, the deeper you can move in.
Right.
Right. But also the repetitiveness of learning Kihon Waza through repetition in kata is how you develop your mind. So
interesting.
Everyone gets to this place where they're just kind of like, I'm sick of this. I'm just going to quit. It happens to me like every day because I have ADHD. I'll be doing the laundry and I'm just like, oh, I just want to quit. But then I go, this laundry's not going to hang itself.
Right.
And if you let it sit here, it's going to mold. And then I just like persevere through it and then finish hanging up, this laundry.
I mean, it's interesting because I look back on Aikido at this school. I started at a different dojo for about 6 months and then I came here. And a lot of the feedback I get from people that visit us is that they're surprised by how basic, what they think of as very basic Aikido compared to a lot of other places. And it seems to me like that you didn't always know what Free Sensei was going to teach, but there was like good structure to it.
Yeah. But like that's the thing about like strengths versus weaknesses, right?
Yeah.
As a teacher, I want to be liked and I have a huge ego and I want money.
So you want fancy techniques.
So I teach all these fancy things for, and everybody kisses my butt, but that's a weakness.
For your technique, for your training.
It just in general, it is flat out weakness. But because I don't have the strength to deal with it, it just becomes this gaping hole. Right. So like I heard this one story about this Aikido teacher who couldn't do Ikkyo or Iriminage. So when he started his own dojo,
he just took it out.
Organization, he just took it out. Right. Yeah. And those are huge foundational skills in Aikido, right? But like, that's the thing is if I don't want my students to see my weakness, then I must hide it. And that's an old school way. Like if you're injured, you never show that you're injured so that no one could ever exploit it.
Take advantage of it, yeah.
But to me, using your strength to power through that no one knows you're injured, to me, that's a huge weakness.
Why is that?
Well, because the truth will set you free. I'm not perfect. I'm not a god, right? Then I have to show, like, it's easy to get injured. It's easy to have a moment of weakness and then step in some dog poo, right? But if I'm like, I'll never such a thing, right, and then you're above reproach, then I'm setting my students up for failure, because there's going to be a moment where they realize that the emperor has no clothes. There's a a hole in the armor, and when they do find it out on their own, a lot of them feel betrayed.
Really, they quit.
Yeah. But if I think this is just my personal opinion, the more you demonstrate your humanness to your students, the more
respect.
That's not the respect. Is that they realize that you suffer too, and that they also don't feel as alone. Oh, the sensei, he's not perfect. Oh, yeah, sensei means one who comes before, being who comes before, and so we're on the same continuum, right? I'm just a little bit higher on the ladder than you, but we're on the same ladder.
Right.
Right. And so I suffer with this. You probably suffer with this.
But isn't there, like, when you talk about injury, isn't there like whether it's a Machiavellian or a Sun Tzu or Book of Five Rings thing of, like, as you say, if you show your injury, like if you don't learn how to work around your injury, like you may just from a day-to-day perspective not be able to get through class if you don't find a way to work around your injuries. Because we've all been injured multiple times.
Okay, so let's say I have a sprained ankle. Right. And I hide my sprained ankle from everybody. And then every time, I
just got it through.
I got through it. When the time comes when they really need my support, I'll just fall down because I have a sprained ankle.
Right. As opposed to being honest about it.
But if I'm honest about it and I go, look, I have this sprained ankle, then people can rally around me and support me so that I can support them. And that also in the same token, let's say they know that my ankle is sprained, but then they see me still training, still coming to class. They're inspired, but they also go, man, if I had that level of inner strength, whew.
Yeah.
But also they go, I don't think I could attack him, because if I had a sprained ankle, I'd be at home watching TV.
Right.
So see, like on a certain level, it demonstrates your weak. Being able to address your weaknesses really demonstrates your true strength. How much you can bench press, lift up, throw people down, that's not true strength. True strength is when you can't go on any farther, can you still go on?
Mm.
The car is rolled over 6 times, slid down the embankment. Everybody in the car is dying. You got to crawl up that embankment with a broken leg.
To rescue everybody.
To look for help, to save your family. And it's not going to matter how strong your biceps are. It's only going to matter how strong your heart is.
Yeah. I was about to say mind, but I guess like will.
Yeah, your will. But yeah. I mean, all those things, Japanese inside is all inside, right? So it's like your heart in Japanese, the kanji for heart is the same kanji for mind, right?
Sure.
That will.
Yeah.
You and that's the thing you develop by addressing your strengths. You develop physical strength and stamina. You look better, you're taller, whatever it is. But by addressing your weaknesses, you develop inner strength. You can't buy inner strength. You can buy muscles. It's called steroids, right?
Yeah.
You cannot buy inner strength. What, dude? Like I know tons of people that are like, they're like cops. They're all badasses and stuff that do something and they just start crying.
They're broken.
And
inside.
I'm just like, what happened to the inner? Like, if you're such a badass, but you're not a badass on the outside. You're a badass because you have a gun. You're a badass because you have authority. You're a badass because you have 20-inch arms. But your inside, your true inside, is so weak that someone just goes, "Hey, you look kind of fat. What did you say?" And then you just start crying.
Apart.
You fall apart. Right, but that's that thing is that in the beginning you have to address you have to use strength to improve yourself, but at some point you must start to journey inward, and that's why Carl Jung says when you can address your own darkness, it enables you to address the darkness of
other
others.
People. Yeah,
right, and so because you can address yourself, you can take on bigger, better, greater, stronger people.
So do you think that there's something in Aikido training or Japanese martial arts training that has like what did you call like a stoic element to it?
I don't know, because in the old days there were a lot of stoic type things that they aren't there anymore.
Like what?
Like in our dojo, there was no bathroom.
Yeah.
So you had to plan ahead and plan accordingly, or you had to be good at making friends with the girl at the cafe next door so that she'll let you use the bathroom.
Right.
You had to, there was no drinking water during class.
Right.
You can drink before, you can drink after, but you're not allowed to drink in the middle. If you sat down, everyone looked down on you.
Right.
You were a wimp, and they would ostracize you. They'd come after you, and because they whenever they saw you were injured, they're like, get them.
Right.
You can't do some of those things today. There are times where, like, for instance, we'd all go to breakfast and people would overeat like crazy, and then the next class they'd be throwing up in the parking lot.
Yeah, not thinking ahead.
Not thinking ahead. So you had to be smart enough to know. And what's funny is that when I was a student, I had to eat before class. Had to.
For energy.
Yeah. Today, if I eat before class, I'm gonna get heartburn. But the old days, so I would be eating and everybody would be like, I can't believe you're eating that much rice before class. And I'd just be like, yeah. And then I trained real hard, but I never had a problem where I'd have to go to the parking lot to throw up. But that's that thing, is that all those rules are spoken or unspoken.
Can't really use them now.
But they forced you to develop inner strength.
Right.
Like Bernard Hopkins, they said, what was the most, they were asking him what was the hardest fighter you ever fought, or the person who punched. He said none of those. And they go, well, what was the hardest thing? He goes, one time I had to go number 2 really bad, And then the fight started, and I had to hold that for the entire fight. And you go instantly.
And someone's punching your stomach.
Yeah. And then instantly we all go, oh yeah, that would be rough. But then I look at Bernard Hopkins and I go, man, that guy's badass.
Yeah.
Because I think, I don't know if I could do that. Hold it for
12 rounds.
12 rounds, and then, but that's that thing. Like Furuya Sensei got his arm broken once, and he didn't like yell out or anything like that. And then he didn't cry or anything like that. And so we asked him, like, why didn't you
do something
about it? He said, because one time in kids class, a kid broke his arm, and then he just walked to the side of the mat and just sat down and then didn't say a word. And Sensei thought that was like so like, wow, this kid has so much inner strength. And they go, I'm going to be like that. So if I ever break my arm, I'm not going to do anything. And so I always remember that. Like I've been kicked in the face accidentally. Someone's dripped sweat into my eye, into my mouth, into my ear, and you can never let
react.
them see you sweat.
Right.
You just be like, nah, it's fine.
Yeah.
And that you because you never let on that you're vulnerable.
Right.
But then later on, though, you have to say that, no, I am vulnerable, because being able to say that you're vulnerable shows a level of inner strength.
Which is one reason why I think, like, if you're doing competition, whether it's boxing or wrestling, or it doesn't matter, anything where there's competition, unless you're tricking someone by faking a weakness, you really have to play to your strengths in a way, I think, in competition, because there's that mental game where you've got to try to crush the opponent mentally. So if they see a false weakness and then you take advantage of it, you can deal with it. But if you're actually like letting your weaknesses show, you're probably going to lose, I would think, in a competition.
Well, no, you're going to lose because of what reason? Why would you lose?
Well, let's say that, I don't know, I'm not a boxer, but let's say you had a really bad jab. And so you would I would imagine you would do other techniques or body positions to de-emphasize the distancing that the jab brings. Right.
And so so I get what you're saying now. Like when I was in high school, there's this guy that hung out with us who had this incredible one punch
strength.
Right hand
cross
punch that was like devastating.
Yeah.
I would say if I had to put like a percentage on it, it was like a 90%
knockout.
Knockout.
Yeah.
Knockout cold. One time we were getting in this huge brawl, and this huge buffed out dude like comes charging out of the crowd, and then we're just like, oh man. And then my buddy just reached over, bam, right in the face, knocked him out cold.
Wow.
And then that turned the fight. All those guys saw that guy go down, and they all ran.
Yeah.
Months later, we're getting in a fist fight out front of my house. Well, he's getting in a fist fight out front of my house, and he punches the guy, drops him, breaks his hand. The guy gets up, and then he just goes.
Nothing left.
He goes, guys.
Yeah.
Because he punched the guy, dropped him, but broke his hand,
disabled
and
himself.
Then the guy got up.
Yeah.
Right. But then once the guy got up, my buddy just started screaming for help.
Yeah.
Because his one great strength
was taken away. Yeah.
Whether if he had done the inner work, he'd just keep fighting.
Yeah.
But because he didn't do the inner work, because he didn't have to do the inner work, this right hook, this right cross, 90% of the time it worked every time.
Yeah.
And then...
Well, that's kind of what you're saying in the beginning of the podcast, where in Aikido, you can't be a one technique guy.
No. Well, you're not supposed to be. Because each technique teaches you a secret, supposedly. So you have to get good at all of them to learn all the secrets. You can't just be the guy who's good at Iri Minage, because the other 80% of the class, there's no Iri Minage, and then you're getting trounced.
Right.
Which used to happen. It would be funny. People used to come into the dojo and like try out our school, from other Aikido schools, and like they'd be really good at like Koshinage or something like that. So they'd be like having you on Koshinage,
right?
And then Sensei would switch the technique, and then
you
just start smashing them, and it would be the funniest thing, because they were so good at that one technique, but they weren't in shape, and then they didn't. The level of their other technique wasn't very good.
Yeah, I know it's a little bit off topic, but I mean, I've never boxed. I know you have, but I love boxing and I love the sport. And I remember I was reading an article about Rocky Marciano, and they were saying he didn't really have good technique. He was not like a fast puncher. He did hit hard, but they said the thing that he did have, his conditioning was like insane for that time period, especially. So you could never dog him out. And I know you talk about that a lot, and as part of training, that is though playing to his strength. Where like if you identify something that if you can't be dogged out, it's going to be very hard to take advantage of you over the long run.
Yeah, like when I first started, they would beat me up every day.
Yeah.
And then so I started doing a ton of cardio to the point where they could still beat me up, but it didn't, I wasn't tired.
Right. Right.
And then after a while they were like, how does this guy keep getting up? And then you would start, the tide would change, and then you would start having them as well.
So I remember you telling me though, on the opposite end of conditioning, because there's different kinds of conditioning, right? Who's the very famous 7th or 8th Dan who does a lot of mobility and yoga training?
Oh, Suganuma Sensei?
Suganuma Sensei. I remember you telling me about him, and I've watched a lot of his stuff now, and it's like I think as you get older, you need to incorporate that kind of training.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, is if you were a smart 30-year-old,
You'd build it into your training.
You would develop yourself to a certain level, and then you would diet, exercise, sleep well, and do all these things so that when you get into your 50s and 60s,
you still have it.
You still have it. But most of us aren't that smart. Like, people who take MSM and chondroitin for their joints. When I was a personal trainer back in the 2000s, people would always be like, "Yeah, I'm taking it." And then I read like a whole bunch of studies that it's ineffective if you take it after the age of 50.
Oh, and they were starting it in their 50s.
They're starting in their 60s. I'm taking that MSM and chondroitin, like probably not helping out.
Right.
Right, but that's why youth is wasted on the youth, right? Like if you knew that this was going to be coming, you would, take precautions for it, but you're not smart enough to think about that because you're only good at being strong. You think you'll always be strong.
Right.
You'll always be fast. But that's the thing, is that age, who are the most undefeated fighters? Time, old age, old injury, Mother Nature.
Right.
Right? They never lose. So that old injury, it comes back to bite you in the butt.
I know this is completely off topic, but are you going to make a prediction about the fight next week?
I'm not going to watch.
You're not going to watch. Okay.
I was back in the day, I was a huge Mike Tyson fan. I'm not going to watch because maybe it's all fixed.
I think it's just might be fake.
It might be fake.
Is that because Jake Paul doesn't have a history as a regular fighter?
I don't know. But also I don't want to watch because it's bad for boxing, right? There's all these people struggling in boxing clubs around the world and in the United States trying to get up to that level.
Right.
The only reason why Jake Paul's at this level is because he has money.
Right. I mean, he gets people to do pay-per-view.
Not only pay-per-view, but like, how do we know that when Evander Holyfield said he's the real deal, he can really fight, that he's not being paid to do that?
Right.
And then he just signs an NDA, and that, like,
everyone thinks it's real and it's not real.
Holyfield needs the 10 grand or 50 grand or whatever they paid him, or whatever people are saying. It's the reason why I don't really want to watch, and I really do want to watch, but the reason why I don't want to watch is that it's reward without work.
What do you mean by that?
This person didn't fight all his way up to that level. He just inserted himself and then is fighting people that are
way above him.
way retired.
Right.
Most professional athletes retire before the age of 30.
Right.
And then Mike Tyson's almost 60, and then you're going to fight him, and then you're going to say, I knocked him out.
Right.
Right. I knocked out Mike Tyson. Right. Like, what happened when I think when Jake Paul fought Tyson Fury, he lost, I can't remember. So he's not 28-0. He's like 28-1, right? So like, if you really fought some of these, Mike Tyson fought his way to the top. All the rest of these fighters fight their way to the top. Jake Paul does not fight his way to the top.
I mean, I'm kind of interested in it because from what I understand, I know this is way off topic, but Tyson has plenty of money. So,
but the thing is that it's not the money, it's the glory, it's the I still got it, and all these things that it's just It's dangerous.
So is there part of you that is over 50 that goes like, I secretly want Tyson to win?
No, I want Tyson to win.
Yeah.
But I don't want him to win because that will open the door up for others
to behave that way.
And him more. And then, I mean, come on. You can't be 60 years old and fighting it like that. I mean, it's not in your favor. And then you're fighting some person that
doesn't really matter anyways.
Yeah. I mean, he didn't fight his way to the top. He just fought some YouTubers, created his own thing, started throwing money around, and then he's going to fight these people.
Well, I think what it is too is like it's the social media effect on a professional sport. And I think like, I don't follow it as much as I used to, but like MMA in the beginning when there was no rounds and no rules, you had basically these 50-minute like wrestling bouts, and people would look at it like kind of boring from a entertainment perspective. And then they changed the rules, and now it's all knockouts. Just like in judo, they changed all the rules, and there's different things. And I think that what's happening is it's the social media transformation of a historically relevant sport.
No, let's just think about it from the topic of this podcast, which is strengths and weaknesses.
Right.
They're using the strength of social media, low attention spans, this, that, and the other thing to make money.
Right, to sell.
Right, and that on a certain level, I mean, how can we fault them? People got to eat, right?
Yeah.
But then that takes us back to like traditional martial arts. All these people bagging out, oh, kata is such bullshit,
right.
Stuff. We don't, dude. What? When you punch a punching bag and you work on the 1, 2, 3, 4, your combination, that's a kata, buddy.
Right.
But like. That's the hard part. Is that if I only focus on my strengths, I'm giving into my own ego and society. So I'm doing push-ups, I do pull-ups, and I think that's the whole thing.
Right.
But if I really worked on my weaknesses, it would be like, why do I need to fight? Why do I get angry? Why is it I don't like this person? And then when you do really work on yourself, you go, oh, I see that thing is, and then that's where the opponent disappears, like the Masakasu Agatsu thing, right? There's no opponent.
Right.
The victory is just yourself because it's really just you. Why must I fight others in the street? Oh, I feel bad about myself inside. Oh, why must I cuss out my boss? Oh, you have these things, and that doing push-ups and looking good and, all that stuff, it doesn't help you. You have to do the inner work.
But realistically, we need to do both. Like if we let our bodies go.
Well, yeah, I'm not saying that. We're talking about strengths and weaknesses, right? We're talking about, yes, if your body's going to go when you turn 50, then you got to start doing yoga and stop eating processed foods and stuff like that. So you're working on a weakness,
right?
You're not pumping up your strength, like you're really shoring up a weakness.
So let me throw something in that I did a little research before the podcast. I just want to get your reaction to it. So, you're a professional Aikidoist. I do Aikido, but I have like a regular day job. So I bump into this issue of strengths and weaknesses in the business world. And I looked at this one article in the Harvard Business Review that had something which actually surprised me and then didn't surprise me given training with Ruth Sensei. The study said that if you looked at people's memory of feedback, meaning like instruction that you might give as a teacher or as a boss in a work, that you are 3 to 4 times more likely to remember the negative feedback than the positive feedback. But then they said in terms of implementation, properly given positive feedback, people actually changed more when given the relevant positive feedback. So I was curious, like if that works in the business environment, because it's really dealing with ego, right? That's all about ego. And the study specifically says, look, this is not an excuse to just give in to telling people everything that they want to hear, but it's a strategy. And I was curious, what do you think about, why do you think we have that structure in our psyche, and how can we use that to our best advantage in Aikido?
Well, that's just part of society, right? When you're supposed to give them a negative sandwich, positive bread, positive, sandwich,
negative in the middle.
Negative in the middle. So it starts off positive, it goes negative, and then it goes positive again. That's because our egos are a little bit weaker.
Vulnerable.
In the old days, you have to learn this martial art because you're going to go off to war.
Yeah, you're going to die if you don't do it.
So there's no time to be worrying about your inner child.
Right.
If the only way for me to wake you up is to slap you, I better slap you. And then I'm slapping you for your own good.
It's so interesting you say that, because I have been watching a lot of the press, like for the Tyson fight, like, because, I mean, I'm in the entertainment industry, so it's always interesting to see how people do that. And one of the things that I saw, this one, I forget who it was old-time boxer, wrote this article. And he said, if you look at the training that Tyson's putting out, like the training videos, you had all these trainers saying, "Oh man, you're doing a great job, blah, 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 blah. Hit, that's perfect. And he said, but if you think about Customato, like he never trained Tyson like that. And I mean, of course, we're looking at the press version of his training, so we don't really know what his real training is like. But it's interesting that, in a way, Tyson, who's some would argue is the greatest heavyweight boxer of all time, now in his twilight years, like they need to put this positive spin on it, because maybe the hard training, which they're showing, is much more mentally severe. And I wonder whether, people just can't see that now.
I don't know. I mean, it's there to make money, right?
Yeah.
So if Tyson loses and he does okay and he loses, that sets it up for a 2.
Right.
Right? If he wins wholehandedly, it sets it up for a 2,
yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, like, either way, it just...
It's a setup.
It's a setup, right? But, like, it's not that it's fair or unfair. It's just that who do you really want to be when you're 60 years old?
Yeah. Well, Tyson he said an interesting thing about that. He said, I don't like the killer in me at all. He said, I don't like that person. And it's interesting because I do think he's playing to the crowd when he says, but when that killer comes out, like the dude on the other side better watch out. But he does say, and maybe it's self-reflection, says like, I don't like that psychology, like the killer psychology.
But then why is he doing this? Right? Like what is my need to be relevant at this age in this arena?
I think what it comes down, because we're talking about strengths and weaknesses, I think that for all of us as we get older, having the win feels good. I think having the win feels good.
Right. You're like, I still got it.
Yeah, I still got it. Like, I think there's an element of that.
But that is that the need for that comes from a weakness.
Yeah. But it's interesting too, because like, I really don't think it's money. Like, from what I've read, Tyson's worth hundreds of millions of dollars from his marijuana business. So like he could do I thought he was going in a different direction. Do you remember when he was doing some like acting roles and he was doing and it was like kind of campy, and I thought the dude's like totally playing off on his past and having a good time, not taking himself too seriously. But I think, like, as you're saying, like in business, how you manage the ego, your own ego and the ego of other people, is the higher skill, right? Like ego management is it's a more difficult skill to manage and implement.
Well, like if we're talking about that youth is wasted on the youth, and if you were 30 and you knew this is what your golden
You'd be
years,
doing a lot of mobility.
You'd be doing all this mobility, eating right, sleeping, and
Right.
doing all these things. If we lay that over Mike Tyson and what he's going to do, it's that he's potentially he has dodged the Parkinson's bullet and with all that stuff, right? He could go in there, get hit really well, and then
done.
wakes up with Parkinson's.
Yeah.
He wakes up with some debilitating illness or injury, disease, because he needed to go in there for what? His ego.
Right.
Right? So that's the thing, is that when you really start to address your own darkness, right, and you fill those holes, there's no need for external accolades.
So how do you try to do that, not necessarily for yourself, but for the students? Because on the one hand, you got this huge hill to climb, right? I mean, you got to take people from like we were doing the fundamentals class today, and I was taking the class, and it was interesting, like watching the way people, like before they move like Aikidoists, they have a certain way of moving their body and then getting out of balance and out of sync. And I looked at that and I'm like, this is interesting, because if this person stays with it, within 6 months, a lot of that just sort of awkwardness gets shaved off, right?
Yeah.
But as a senior teacher, chief instructor like you've got to look at 5, 10, 15-year horizons for your students. And so you've got the physical, You've got to like get people physically competent. But as you said earlier in the podcast, the harder battle, the harder skill is the mental skill.
Yeah. I mean, like a football coach, Buddy Ryan, said that it takes like 500 hours to master a skill.
Right.
And up to 25,000 repetitions to fix the skill if it's broken.
Oh, jeez.
Right.
Which is always why Furuya-sensei didn't want us seeing any other Aikido, right?
Not necessarily that, but it's just that to focus yourself, right? You're watching any old Aikido teacher teaching any old thing, you don't know, but you're training your eye. And then all of a sudden you pick that thing up, and then you
don't even know you picked it up.
And you picked it up, and you got to get rid of it. It's going to take you 25,000 repetitions to get it out. How long is 25,000 repetitions?
A couple years.
Yeah, especially when you only did it 20 times in a class.
Right.
Right? It's take you a long, long time to get that thing out that you accidentally allowed
So why
yourself
do you
to get
think,
in there.
because I mean, you have a certain, obviously, level of expertise in sports psychology or, physical implementation of technique. Why do you think the mind is wired that way, that like you can learn a skill, let's say 500 hours, but let's say like 80% of the skill you picked up is really good, but you got a 20% flaw in it. Why do you think that ratio is so crazy that you can pick up the 80% really well in 500 hours, which is easily you could do in a couple months if you came every day. But then you have this one quirk from somewhere, you watch it on a video, and to iron that or shave that crap out is like hundreds of times harder than learning the basic skill. Why is that?
I'm not sure why it is, but that's the reason why that people shouldn't go to seminars until they're a certain level. Because you want that teacher to look at you and refine you, right. Not just teach you some crazy thing with 10 grip changes and makes you all look all cool, right? That you want to get to a level in your own training where your mastery of your subconscious is so strong that it's not going to take you 500 hours to master a skill. Right. It'll take you 5 minutes.
Interesting.
But if you don't have a mastery over your subconscious,
it won't work.
Yeah. So like you have to acutely know how long it takes you to get into a subconscious state. And if you don't know, then you may not ever get into it.
Yeah. I mean, you and I talked about this after the 50th anniversary seminar. So we had class Friday, 5 classes Saturday, 5 classes Sunday, dinner on Saturday night, dinner Friday night. One of the things I told you after the seminar, which I thought was a really fascinating observation, although you've always said that this would happen, I didn't know it would happen in this context, which was from like Friday night until Monday morning, even though I've got tons of other stuff going on, doing all that training and being in a very incremental mindset. Like you're okay, you start class, you got to get through the warm up, then you got to do the next technique, and you can't like think about Sunday. You can only think about the thing that's in front of you. And in a way, like that I'm going to call mindlessness of it is, but like non-reflective mental state creates a lot of flow. And it's hard to get into that flow.
But the thing is, that's part of your training is however long it takes you to get in that flow.
You got to get into it.
No, but that interval is the moment is how you're going to be defeated.
Interesting. Why?
Because your body needs to move subconsciously. And if you're in a conscious mindset, it's going to move much slower.
Right.
And so while you're getting your mind into, and that's why most people can only enter into a subconscious state after they've been punched in the face.
Really?
Because they go right into fight or flight. And their fight or flight's been trained to go subconscious. They can't get there unless the threat punches them in the face. But of course that's dangerous.
Because you get knocked out.
Yeah. That person gets off a good shot. So you have to train yourself to drop yourself into a subconscious state instantly.
Right. Instantly.
That's part of your training. And how you do that is because you've addressed all these weaknesses. See, the weaknesses are like bubbles in the cauldron that are just waiting to bubble up. So when Aikido is done in silence, right? There's not music. There's not, a whole lot of talking.
Right.
That lets those negative bubbles percolate to the top. And then that's why a lot of people quit, is because their stuff came up. It's like walking meditation, moving meditation.
Interesting.
And so because you've addressed all those things, nothing bubbles up to the top.
So, like in your experience, having been a student for a very long time and a teacher now for a very long time, chief instructor, when, from the patterns that you've seen, at what stage or time in grade do people reach that thing where they're like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm getting diminishing returns because they can't switch to the mental game.
It's third cue and third dawn.
Third cue and third dawn.
But that's the thing, is that like if they can push through that, then they can start accessing their inner mindset.
Yeah.
But if you can't push past that and you just quit, you'll never get to that place.
I saw this, I don't know where it is, but it was an article I saw. It might have been a long time ago, like something like Aiki Web or something like that, where they talked about, and I think you and I have talked about this. Like if you look at the potential historical timeline of a student, that the percentage of people that go from just starting to 6th Q, like 50%, then 6th Q to 5th, just keeps dropping, right? So that by the time you get to Shodan, like only 1 out of 1,000, 1 out of something like that, some crazy number. So given that there are these staged drop-offs with like a deep drop-off at 3rd Q and 3rd Dan, are there any psychology tricks that you use to get people past those drop-offs?
I don't have things that I work through with people. I wish they would just come talk to me.
Yeah.
And be like, look, I have this thing.
I'm struggling.
And I would say, look, this is the thing you got to do.
Yeah.
Most times they just quit. Right. But then that's the thing, is Aikido is for everyone, but it is not for everyone.
Yeah.
And those people are supposed to fall away. Right. And that's again, everyone has an expiration date. Is going to quit sooner or later.
Right.
Some of it, you just died and then that's your quitting. Right. But
right.
That's that thing, is that everyone has that place where they can no longer go forward anymore. And then once you reach that place, no matter what rank you are, you have to push yourself through it. And if you can push yourself through it, then you can push yourself through anything.
Right.
But most people, they just go, I got to get out of here. And they quit. They fell prey to their weakness. And their strengths weren't strong enough to push them through.
Yeah. I mean, I remember you and I would talk about this. I don't know that it's as true now, given the pandemic and everything that's happened, because people are more self-focused. Like before the pandemic, like I know I'm lawyers. I work in the legal world. Like before the pandemic, people came to the office 5-6 days a week. They worked 12, 14, 16 hours a day. Something happened with the pandemic where people are like, when I don't go to work every day, I can get my work done, but I can go to the supermarket and I can take care of my kids. I can do homeschooling. But there, I think like people, if you think of work as a thing you do on yourself, like not necessarily just for the money, but your work is a process. I think that people after the pandemic were like, I want to have more personal self-fulfillment. And I wonder, has that affected the martial arts too, where people are not as gritty as they were before?
It's not as it's a gritty thing or anything like that. It's just that, what is this worth? If it took me 30 years to develop, then that's just too long.
Right.
My kids are going to grow up. They have all the stuff that needs to be done. I got to trim my hedges, right? And so, one of the things that the pandemic really brought to the forefront is that you could die at any time,
right?
Whether it just be from grabbing the gas pump handle and then wiping your face, and then you get a disease and then you die. Like you could die any time. And so, how do I want to spend my time? I don't want to spend my time 40 to 80 hours a week at the office with my boss, who's kind of a jerk named Bill D'Angelo.
Right.
I can do 30 hours of work that looks like 80 hours of work from my house.
Right.
And I could pick up my kids and get my dog and do all these things. Why don't I just do that? Should I come to class? I'm sick of that David Ito guy, man. Screw this. And then it doesn't mean as much.
Yeah.
But you're hoping that the pendulum swings back and then people start to see that there's value in pushing yourself past this point of I'll just quit.
Right.
I'll just quit, right? I'll just quit if that happens to me, right? Because there's benefits to Aikido. That if you want to become a better person because you have this weakness, you got to work on it through Aikido. You want to become a better person, so you want to strengthen yourself, you can do that through Aikido.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've talked about this in a lot of podcasts before about mastery. And I think what I was getting at is that people started to see work less as proving their ego in the work environment, and then they got a little bit of reflection about the benefits of more balance.
Well, yeah, I mean, what's the old adage go? When you're on your deathbed, you're never going to say you wished you worked more.
Yeah.
Right. And that your boss, who's kind of a jerk, forget that guy.
Yeah. I mean, there's a very famous email out there that apparently Steve Jobs wrote to himself 6 months before he died, and has very little to do with being a billionaire or making Apple successful. But like you think of, and again, I don't know Steve Jobs, I can't judge him, but it's interesting that he wrote this and basically wrote it to himself and said, like, damn, like you spent all this conscious energy, and what did you get back? I think that's what people are responding in the pandemic. I'm not saying it's the right answer or that the new right balance has been struck, but I do think it's interesting because people, I think it might be really good for Aikido. If people are like, I don't have to work 60 hours a week, then they might be able to train.
Right, but then when they come to Aikido, it can't seem like work.
It has to be something different.
Well, and that's why today it's more like entertainment, right? Entertainment, training,
right.
Entertainment, that you're getting a benefit out of that, this thing, but then you didn't have, it wasn't so arduous, right? The teacher didn't slap you when you made a mistake. The other students didn't bloody your nose when you burped on the mat, right? That it was fun enough.
Right.
And interesting, and you got a good workout, and so you get all the benefits without this, the teacher stringing you up because you're wearing a shirt that says bum equipment, right? And that's the thing that kind of has to change, and that's where the transparency of the teachers demonstrating their weakness. They're to show that you're a human being also. When I yell at you and I say, look, I'm sorry, I was having a bad day,
right?
And I apologize for that. You're like, oh, I understand.
Yeah.
But in my day, since he just went off on you, and then you went home, felt all bad at yourself, and then when you came back the next day or whatever, he was pretending like it never happened.
Right.
That's unhealthy.
Right.
It's healthy to address the elephant in the room and say, dude, I was having a bad day. I am really sorry. And then you try not to do that ever again.
Right. Well, I mean, it's... The other thing I think is so fascinating about this is there's no way you could have predicted that this would happen in our lives.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's nice that it did, because it really brought the balance back to your life, because you can see what things are important and what things aren't important. Right. And if we look at it from the topic of this podcast, strengths and weaknesses, you realize having 20-inch arms and a 28-inch waist and doing all these things, that's just outside stuff.
Right.
But I really want to spend time with my children and deepen relationship with my wife, because those are the things that really matter. Because in the end, all these old Aikido teachers, martial arts teachers, well, no, they all had these horrible personalized and horrible endings. Their wife hated them. They hated their wife. They got divorced.
Alcoholics.
You go alcoholics. You think, oh my God.
Yeah.
But that's because they put so much emphasis on their strengths,
right,
and not enough emphasis on their weaknesses. And say, like, why do I got to yell at you?
Right.
Why does this person make me mad? And
so do you think that have you seen in the Aikido community since the pandemic a change in the way people teach, demonstrate?
Not in a good way. I think what happened is that anybody who was unwilling to adapt faded away, and anyone who was willing to adapt rose to power. And then now the meek inherited the earth, and all these people that are horrible Aikido teachers, horrible Aikidoists are prominent because they know how to use a camera and social media.
Yeah.
Right. So it's the same thing for strengths and weaknesses, right? Like social media and the internet, right? It's just another tool, right? Yeah. It's just a pen and paper, right? And so today, you got to learn how to use it, because that's how people interact with one another. But you don't need to engage in it in a way in which you attack others.
Right.
You could just say,
although we're constantly under, and I say we with in quotes, we're, the Aikido world is constantly under attack in the social media space.
Do you care?
No.
I don't care. You know why I don't care? Because I've worked on my weaknesses and I don't care.
Right.
But if I didn't work on my weaknesses, I'd be like, those MFers, let's go down to his school, punch out his teacher, because I'm weak inside. Yeah. I'm hopefully stronger, not.
But it's interesting. It's not just in Aikido. Like if you look at the social media dynamic is work, personal life, sports, food. Like it's that mentality has taken over every dynamic that a human being has.
Yeah. So, but that's the thing is that it only affects you if you haven't addressed your weaknesses.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this is a really interesting topic. I don't think there's a straight answer.
No.
We've talked about how playing to your strengths, working on your weaknesses has at least two vectors, right? One is the teacher. The other one is the student. And then I guess the third one would be just applying these principles into our personal lives in any area. How would you like... If you wanted the Aikido student to take away something from this podcast, what would you want people to hear?
I don't know, that life is a balance of strengths and weaknesses. Yeah. We use our strengths to improve ourselves, but we really, really deepen our experience when we address our weaknesses.
Yeah.
And that both those things, they play a role in our lives, and that it's good to be strong and fit on the outside, but it's better to be strong and fit on the inside.
Yeah. I think that's exactly where we should end. I think that's a good summary.
Excellent. So thank you for watching, and don't forget to like or subscribe to this podcast.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.